G'day there folks, this is Beanie and you're watching another Beanie Draws video. This video is of me drawing a Brachiosaurus. As you can see, I'm putting down my shapes and cylinders and basic structures to form the basic shape of the Brachiosaurus before I get to and put in the more refined details. So I've got cylinders for the legs, a bit of a whipish tube for the tail, and for the neck. Now, interestingly enough, the neck of the Brachiosaurus looks a little bit like an elephant trunk, especially with the head at the tip, which could be like the gripping part of an elephant trunk. Now, what else I'm doing here is I've put in the trees, I've put in the brief stick figure structures of the humans, and a little bit of a background. I'm going to be refining them soon, but right now I'm refining the details in the Brachiosaurus. I've got the shapes and the tubes and structures, so now I'm actually forming my main lines around that structure. So as you can see, I'm putting in the head, putting in the details in the body, and I have done a new tail because the other tail was a little bit too big for my liking. Then I'm refining out more of the trees just so they look a little bit more than just like random lines on the page. The basic idea of trees is you draw them thick at the bottom and you gradually taper them to the tips, which is what I'm basically doing here, using a source image, which is a screen capture from the movie itself, naturally. So I'm just using that picture and I'm trying my best to draw these trees to look like those trees. So I'm slightly wiggling my lines, and yeah. Now what I'm doing is I'm getting the neck of the Brachiosaurus. Actually, what I'm doing here basically is I'm starting to put in the basic shading shapes of where the light will form shadows over the Brachiosaurus. So I've got a bit on the shoulder, a bit on the one edge of the arm, and a little bit and no shading on the other edge, and just like putting shading. Some bits of the shading are darker than the others, just kind of getting an idea of where the light falls on the body. So as you can see there with the tail, I've only got the shading on the underside because the top end of the Brachiosaurus is being hit by light. And now I decided I wanted to transform into my weapon of choice, which is the ballpoint pen. So now I'm using a ballpoint pen or a biro, and getting in more details because, as I've said in other videos, pencils are a little bit difficult. Well, you can only get so much detail in lead until it starts kind of blending and blurring out. With some drawings that works well. When you're working on a smaller scaled illustration with more detail, you need a bit of a finer line, and that's where I like to bring in my ballpoint pen. It renders very similarly to a pencil, so the less pressure you put on the ballpoint, the less ink you get. The more pressure you put on that ballpoint, the more ink you get. So it's a little bit like a pencil in terms of how much pressure you put on to get, your darkness in your lines, but yeah, it comes out much darker and much more detailed than pencil. So now I'm doing the toes of the Brachiosaurus, trying to get some folds in the ankle, getting some of the lines in the muscles, and yeah. So now I'm putting in more details, just more details. I'm building up the structures and the folds in the skin, basically, the little bits of folds in the stomach. Refining some of those patterns, refining some of those wrinkles and shades, making that neck of the Brachiosaurus look more like a trunk, I guess. It really does look like an elephant trunk when you think about it. So that's the best way to draw it. Just imagine an elephant trunk, and that is the best way to draw a Brachiosaurus neck, because it is incredibly flexible. So you'd have all these different little lines of folding, which is why you can see all these little lines right down the neck, which is basically my way of drawing in the skin textures. And now I am drawing in more properly, that's John Hammond, and refining the leg as well. Basically, when I do my drawings, I render and put in detail just where my eye kind of sees that needs to be done. So like the legs I see that needed to be done, and there now I'm doing in Alan Grant because he was just there. Then I do Ellie Settler. She's looking back at John Hammond, going, It's a dinosaur." So getting the pose there. Then I started a bit of the grass. I'll be doing a lot more of that soon. But then I wanted to refine the legs, and now I believe I am starting on the bush structure behind the Brachiosaurus, putting a bit of chest folds, bit of that skin texture, and soon, which I don't really do much of that in my videos, but there's a lot of tree drawing in this illustration. There's not much detail in the Brachiosaurus head, I must admit. It's a very small amount of detail, but here we go. This is me putting in the trees. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to get a more refined shadow on the tree trunks, but also using lots of little squiggly lines and circles for the leaves. As you can see there, I've put in the shading of the tree to kind of be similar to the shading of the Brachiosaurus as well. So I'm using, I'm using mostly vertical strokes for this to get one side sharp, darker than the other. And here we go, putting in the branches. Some of the leaves, and some of the leaves that I do are sort of circular. Some of them are just random sort of wobbly lines. Some of them aren't even shapes, they're just like little patches of color. Soon I will be realizing that at the top edge of that illustration that the camera wasn't actually picking up any of it, but it's okay. We're moving down the tree again. Some of the branches I make dark, like very, very dark, so stark black. Some of them I give them a bit of a light edge, so you can see like, half of the cylinder is half white, half black, using the paper as the highlights basically. I wasn't sure if I was going to actually put in this last tree, but I figured that I needed the branches and the bushes to make the scene look more fulfilled. So I decided to draw this tree in, and now I'm doing what I was doing again with the leaves. Some of them are detailed leaves, some of them are just like, squiggly lines. Unless you really, really, really want to spend many, many, many multiple hours on your leaves, you can really just imply the leaves. You don't have to draw them properly, just a little squiggly line here and there, and then a little bit of a blocked amount of pattern texture, and that will give you the indication of your bushes and that. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting in the back, the bushes in the far background, and filling in more branches. This section of the illustration has a lot of leaves and a lot of just detail. So what I was doing here is I was trying to get kind of little patches and shapes of leaves. Some of them are a little bit detailed, some of them aren't. Some of the areas I'm just like putting in just dark lines. Some of them I'm just doing little squiggles. Sometimes I'm just like, impressionistically putting in areas that are meant to look like trees. Basically, I'm actually using the pen like as a paintbrush around here. I'm just putting in little, like, some of them, just putting in layers and patches of shape. So yeah, that was me moving things around, swapping between image sources to make sure that I was getting the right sort of look of the plants, and I was. And yeah, putting in lots of black patches. Some of them are very refined, some of them are big, some of them, like, I guess you could almost, trees, the way that I draw their leaves are a little bit like very, 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 very stark clouds. So you use those little tiny, instead of the big curved lines, you just use really tiny little curved lines. You don't have to worry too much about being specific in the detail. Just you put in your indications. So now I'm putting the last touches of the illustration. So I've got the plants, putting more detail on the branches and the trees, and putting a little bit more detail in the background, refining some of those branches and refining some of the trunks, and I'm pretty close to being finished now. So I hope you have enjoyed watching me drawing this iconic scene from Jurassic Park. If you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will have more for you in the future. Thank you for watching.